Today's social media segment is brought to you by Parabon General Health Systems, modern technology, and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bourke, know your rights. South Louisiana Bank, it's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. Alford and Associates, for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Weissite, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care. Very glad you're joining us, however you may be joining us. We appreciate it very, very much. And listen, when you want to get information about what's happening and some of the decisions that are being made, we always go to the source and try and find that out as we welcome back to the program Beryl Amedee. Beryl over in Baton Rouge, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Of course, State Representative Amedee, I know a lot's been going on. We've heard lots of information and updates. Tell us what you can about what's been decided through this crime session.
Well, I think it was a very productive session. There weren't a tremendous amount of bills, but the bills that we had were high quality bills. So I think we can say that we accomplished a lot. I believe that all of the bills in the governor's package were made the successful round through the session, and with very little amendment that I can remember. So that was good. Mm-hmm. And so I have a little list of some of the ones that the public seemed to be focused on the most. Okay. And I'll share those with you. We had House Bill 1 that provides public access to court records of juveniles who are being tried for violent crimes. And this one came about because in so many cases, those people who were victims of violent crime at the hands of a criminal who was not of the age of majority were not notified of happenings along the way through the whole court process. And so they missed out very often on opportunities to sit and watch testimony or maybe even give input. And so with this bill passing, criminals who commit crimes of violence, tremendously violent crimes, who happen to be underage, will their court records will be made public so that victims and the general public can be aware of what happens in court. House Bill 7 increase the penalties for carjacking because, you know, that crime really skyrocketed in the past few years in Louisiana. Mm-hmm. House Bill 8 increased penalties for fentanyl if it is marketed with minors in mind. Basically, fentanyl that's packaged in a way that would attract children. Mm-hmm. So if fentanyl is not bad enough on the streets, to think that somebody is actually putting it in pretty little packages or making it look like candy or putting friendly cartoon character faces on it somehow, that's just horrible. So we've increased the penalties in those cases. Good. House Bill 9 is one of those serve the time bills. It took away a lot of parole for violent crimes. And so people who commit violent crimes and who end up paying the penalty for that will not be eligible for parole, or at least not nearly as early as they currently are. Okay. House Bill 11 extends probation. So there are a lot of people right now who get away with a crime without having to serve much probation time. Well, this bill increases the amount of time that probation will be applied in certain circumstances. Senate Bill 1 was all over the news. I got plenty of phone calls and emails about it. Senate Bill 1 was this year's constitutional carry bill. Mm-hmm. And after many years in a row, this bill has finally passed. And so that means Louisiana law will align with our U.S. Constitution, where it generally says that if you're an adult and there's no reason to prohibit you from carrying a firearm, you will now be allowed to. And so what this means is people who were able to open carry before and who maybe were out in the evening and got a little chilly and put on a jacket and oops, now their gun is covered. Well, now they won't be criminalized just because of that. So if you're able to carry, you'll be able to carry with a jacket on. So it's a constitutional carry. Okay. That passed and the governor signed it. Mm-hmm. So it actually goes into effect on the 4th of July. So a little patriotism there.
Very, very appropriate.
Yes. Senate Bill 3 says that a 17-year-old who commits a violent crime can be tried as an adult or will be tried as an adult. Senate Bill 5 says that the parole board, when voting on whether to allow parole for a certain individual, must vote unanimously. If it's not unanimous, there's no parole. Senate Bill 10 restricts good time credit. Through testimony during the session, we heard stories such as you get 17 days off of your sentence for every 1 day of good time. And so that means that people were not really serving a lot of their actual sentence. So with the passage of this bill, it seems that people will now have to serve, I think it's 85%, at least 85% of their actual sentence. So it's our hope that all of these little changes, and I guess some of these to some people are big changes, that all of these changes will result in a lessening of crime, especially violent crime in Louisiana, because we've been at the top of some really bad lists for way too long.
Yeah, and some really good points. And again, we've heard about some of these in the information that's been coming out, but it just seems like a lot of these bills just make sense. They just make more sense that as long as we've got the personnel, let's keep their probation as long as it was intended. You know, let's not give somebody 17 days off for good behavior when they have one good day. I mean, that one for one, okay. Well, but let them serve the bulk of their time. And I think that was the point of the 85% and being able to say, look, you need to be able to serve 85% of what it is that you were initially jailed for, because that was tied to the crime itself.
Yes, and it just occurred to me, I didn't have this one on my list. I forgot the bill number, but it was a bill about capital punishment. It increased the optional methods for capital punishment in Louisiana. Currently, it's only by injection, and that's been very limited over an issue with a pharmaceutical company that provides the drug. Mm-hmm. And so this bill expands it to injection or electrocution or gas chamber. So we may actually see some executions in this state again. I don't think we've seen one since 2010.
It's been a long time.
And that particular individual volunteered. He gave up the rest of his appeals to volunteer to be executed. Yeah. And so I don't think anybody likes the idea, but we do have a responsibility. And only people who commit the most violent of murders are ever put on death row. And we do have to think of the victims.
Absolutely. Beryl, we appreciate your time. We'll ask you to stick around if that's okay. We'll be right back with Beryl Amedee when we continue here on Bayou Time.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Parabon General Health Systems, modern technology, and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bourke, know your rights. South Louisiana Bank, it's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. Alford and Associates, for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Bayou Time. Again, your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care. Very glad you're joining us and always glad to be getting some updates of those things happening over in Baton Rouge as we welcome back into the program State Representative Beryl Amedee. Beryl, thanks again for joining us.
Yes, sir. My pleasure.
All right. Now, I know we went through all of the different, or most of the updates that we learned and took place in the crime session. Tell us a little bit about some of these updates from the BESE meeting.
Sure. This week, BESE, which is the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, had a meeting that I'm very excited about. And there was a lot of fanfare among grassroots organizations and the moms that have paid attention for the last several years over all things BESE. In the meeting, there were 3 items specifically on their agenda that people were very concerned about. And all 3 came out well in this meeting, and I'll tell you about them.
All right.
One of the first items was to remove what we call social emotional learning from the early childhood education standards. Social emotional learning, or SEL, has been touted as a plan to promote racism from a young age, to teach that people are inherently different based on their physical characteristics, their ancestral background and such. And so we're very excited that BESE has voted to remove SEL from early childhood education standards. And it's been a long time coming. The second was a requirement that when schools send home information concerning immunizations, that they also include information about an exemption that exists in law. Right now, many parents believe that if their child does not get every single immunization that's on the list, on the schedule that's required for school attendance, that their children will be kicked out of school and not allowed to attend. And it's really not true. There are children who have certain medical indications that say they should not get certain immunizations. There are parents who refuse certain immunizations based on either religious or just philosophical preferences. So there are many reasons why someone might object to a particular vaccine or to maybe vaccines in general. And so right now in law, if a parent objects to a particular vaccine or to even to all vaccines for their student, they can submit a notice to the school saying that they're objecting to whichever vaccines. The problem is the majority of parents don't even know that's an option. And so many times parents feel compelled to bring their children in for certain vaccinations that they believe could be harmful or scary to them, that the risk, in their opinion, just does not the benefit is minimal. And so they would prefer not to get them, but they believe they have to. So now when schools send home information about shots, they're going to also have to include information about an exemption so that parents can take advantage of that exemption in cases where they feel that that's best for their child. And then the third item has to do with FAFSA. Currently, if you're wanting to graduate from a public school, you are required to fill out a FAFSA form, or actually your parents are required. And that's a federal form for financial student aid for college. And not every student is going to go to college. And so this was an effort early on to try to get students to see whether they're even eligible, because some students who maybe would go to college if they were eligible for financial aid didn't even know it because they weren't even applying. So while it seems that it was innocent enough to place this requirement on the record, it hasn't really worked out that way. Instead, being forced to fill out this form, no matter your circumstances, is rather intrusive. It's kind of an invasion of privacy. There are some parents who just don't feel the need to turn over such information just for their student to be able to get a high school diploma. And so now this requirement is being removed, and parents will no longer have to submit all this financial information just for their student to graduate. Instead, it'll be an option. You can fill it out if you want to, you can fill it out if you need to, but you don't have to. especially not just to get your diploma. So these are three victories that we had been hoping for and waiting for, and now the time is right. With changes on the BESE board, with changes in administration, there was finally enough support to get these three irritations taken care of. So that's done.
Well, and it's really exciting because it sounds like we're really taking a focus on making sure that the parents are involved in decision making, letting them know what their options are, and kind of making sure that we are taking away any cultural insensitivity that children may have early on, that we kind of want to remove that so that we can find ways to bring people together instead of having people pulled apart. So really exciting. So I agree with you. Three irritations is a good way to say that, but it's also three big wins for the BESE board. So some really good information. So Beryl, we appreciate your time as always. If you wouldn't mind, we'd love to have you come back and talk a little bit more about what things look forward to in the next session.
Sure.
All right, very good. All right, guys, Beryl's going to stick around. You do that as well. We'll be right back here on Bayou Time.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Parabon General Health Systems, modern technology, and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bourke, know your rights. South Louisiana Bank, it's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. Alford and Associates, for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Bayou Time. Again, your host, Keith Weissite, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care. Very glad you're joining us, however you may be joining us, and very glad to get some updates from Beryl Amedee, of course, our representative. Thank you so much for joining us again, Beryl.
Yes, sir.
All right. We appreciate that. I know we've got a general session coming up. We've talked a little bit about what we found out in the BESE meetings, talked a little bit about what was happening with the crime bills. Let's talk a little bit about what we're anticipating and maybe some of the bills you'll be presenting and talking about in this next general session.
Okay, sure. So this year it's a general session, meaning it's not a fiscal only session. So we will be focused on the budget because we do have to pass a budget every year, and it has to be balanced, by the way, unlike Congress. But in a general session, we have a lot of bills that are about a great number of things. And so I checked, and as of today, it looks like 1,093 regular bills have already been filed. And so that's between the House and the Senate. We're going to have some more bills filed once session begins. So we might make it up to our average of around 1,600 by the time we count resolutions and everything.
Wow.
And so that's a lot. We will be dealing with the budget, of course,
right.
As I said. Now, this year, we know that we have some projected shortfalls coming up. One of them is one we've been anticipating for a long time, and that is the roll-off of the 0.45 cent sales tax. That's going to happen next summer. And so we have to prepare the budget accordingly because that'll be that much less revenue that comes in. The budget that the governor has proposed is about $47 billion, which is a little bit less than the current budget, which is more like $52 billion. And so we're already seeing an adjustment for the anticipated shortfalls. And so once we're already having budget hearings on the Appropriations Committee, where we're hearing from each department about their projected budget and how they're going to operate. And that's gone well. And so besides budget bills, many of the House and Senate members have been actively writing bills for the past several months. And I have a little list that includes many on some aspect of education. Now, a lot of people have been waiting for the Parental Rights Amendment bill that I was carrying. And it's a constitutional amendment proposal that would say that parental rights are fundamental. And this would keep the government from getting in between parent and child unless and until it's actually necessary, which would be like in the cases of neglect and abuse, of course.
Right.
But I've been asked by our Attorney General to hold that bill until the court case against the bill that was passed last year that prohibits mutilation of minors. It was a Child Protection Act that was passed. Right now it's being challenged in court. And so until those court cases are over, the Attorney General has asked me to hold this bill. So it looks like I'll have to bring it next year. Mm-hmm. So besides that bill, the other bills that I'm carrying this year are mostly focused on education. We will have a bill that concerns French education or French immersion. As you know, the Cajun language will die if we don't teach younger generations. So I have several bills that involve some aspect of teaching French in schools. Now, the big wish list bill, as I call it, would require about 3 credits of French in elementary, and then 3 more in middle, and then 3 more in high school. And so that's a big ask. So we will see what happens to that bill and how much of it we can actually get passed. Another bill has to do with the process by which a French immersion school can be set up in a school district. As you know, we have one in Terrebonne Parish now, and the process is difficult. So we're trying to make that process a little streamlined and more able to come to pass. We're trying to make it a little bit easier, a little bit clearer, so that we can have more French immersion schools all around the state. Some other bills that I'm carrying have to do with, I call it the Don't Say Free bill. This is not a prohibition on free speech, of course. Right. This is a bill that would say that any government agency or department that's advertising a product or a service to the public at no cost to the individual, they're not going to be able to use the word free in that advertisement because, as you know, it's not free. Whatever the government is offering has been paid for by our tax dollars. So they'll have to come up with another way to say it. Now, it's probably not a big problem. I don't have at hand an example of a Louisiana agency that has used the word free. But if that's the case, this shouldn't be a problem. The bill should pass and they won't be able to use the word free later. They'll have to say at no cost or something. And then there will be some other bills that I'm carrying that do little minor changes. And as we get into session, I'll be happy to come back and tell you all about those as they make progress.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's a whole lot of those. And I love the fact that, as always, a lot of your focus is about education. The focus is making sure that we're allowing for our kids. I love the idea of the 3, 3, and 3 rule with getting kids credit for attending, getting them credits for learning that other culture. And it's basically learning the culture that already exists. And we're trying to kind of continue that. So some really interesting bills. And again, sometimes it happens where our bills kind of get pushed forward because there are other related issues. And so I'm sorry that one, because I know that was one that you were very passionate about making yes. sure that the kids' rights were being able to be respected in that sense. Yeah.
Yes, and sometimes a good bill takes multiple years to pass, so I don't mind.
Yeah, very good. Beryl, we always appreciate the updates. Thank you for all of the time that you spend with us and all of the decisions that were made. It seems like we had a lot of headway in this particular session and even more in the general session to come.
Yeah, we're looking forward to good things to come.
All right. Thanks so much. All right, guys, that'll do it for this particular segment and this Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. A whole lot more local programming right here on HTV.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Terrebonne General Health Systems, modern technology, and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bourke, know your rights. South Louisiana Bank, it's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford Tough, Alford and Associates for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.